Hey everyone, I'm Sean Deveney from Heavy on Celtics. I am very fortunate today to be joined by the great Steve Bulpett, longtime Celtics beat writer and now heavy sports insider on the NBA. Hey Steve, how are you?
Why would you do serious damage to your credibility with that kind of introduction, Sean? I just don't get it. I don't understand.
It's all every word. I stand by every word I said. Let's talk some Celtics. Let's talk a little bit of what happened this week. First of all, I think the big news is the Gallinari injury, playing for the national team in Italy, and it hurts his knee. Very fortunate it's not an ACL. That's been the big problem with him over the course of his career. But this is a guy, I did the math, who has missed 35% of his team's games during his NBA career. And injuries have just always been with him. How big of a concern is this? Is this something that, just with Gallinari, you just have to sort of expect it and hope that he's, ready in May, or is this something that, team that if you're within the Celtics organization, you're just kind of regretting having gotten this guy?
The answer to your question is based on how serious this injury is and what the recovery time is. And when he is quote unquote recovered, how solid is that? If this is similar to the Rob Williams situation, where it's just a little bit of meniscus, that's something they can get through. They're not going to be asking Danilo Gallinari to do a whole lot. So he's going to have a relatively limited role that's going to be really suited toward his strengths. The answer to your question really is we won't know until they get the true finding on the prognosis, and then if the prognosis holds.
Yeah, meniscus is funny, and I'm not a doctor, obviously, or an orthopedic surgeon. I don't even play one on YouTube. But I do know enough, and I've seen enough from the history here to know that if it's something where you can just kind of pull out a little piece of it and you can get back in 6 weeks or so, then you can do that. If you have to take out a whole lot of it, then you're in for a longer period of recovery, and sometimes everything can go wonky on you the way it did with Zion Williamson. So it is kind of a I saw November mentioned, and that would be great. I think it's way too early to say that's when he's going to be back.
Yeah, I think they will certainly, whatever comes out of this for the first findings here, I think you can expect the Celtics to err heavily on the side of caution. There are other guys that can get looks in the meantime. Look, I think one of the issues when you bring in Brogdon and Gallinari is, are you going to be, cutting out minutes for Peyton Pritchard? I think with this situation now, a guy like Sam Hauser might get more of a look. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If there's a reasonable expectation that Danilo Gallinari can be able to play, contribute, and be consistent, in someone you can count on, if those situations can be true by February, and in the meantime, you've gotten looks at guys and seeing what they can contribute and gotten more comfortable with them in case you need them down the line, I think that's not a bad situation for the Celtics.
Yeah, it sounds like you're answering my next question as you're speaking here, and that is, when you look at training camp and sort of the way they had training camp set up in terms of having guys like Caboclo and Kevin Geely, pursuing maybe some bigger roles with the team if they can win them in October. It sounds like you're saying that you don't expect that to change, that you don't expect them to go out and sign Carmelo Anthony, for instance, a name that was thrown out there. I don't think there's a whole lot of chance that that's where they're going to turn. But you don't see them going out and finding a more reliable option, maybe that's still on the market.
Well, again, let's go back to what they find in Gallinari's knee. If it's a serious situation where it ain't going to happen for him this year, then I think maybe they do. I think they certainly wouldn't mind having veteran types they can lean on. But at age 38 for Carmelo, you don't lean too hard.
Yeah.
No, look, I think a Carmelo Anthony in the right situation, placed in the right situations, would be good for this team. This is not the same Carmelo Anthony between the ears type guy that he was in New York. He's a guy that understands his basketball mortality now, and I think he'd be a good fit in a lot of ways for you. Again, I guess we're talking about how he is health-wise. He's never going to be a defensive stopper for you, but if he can give you, some of those veteran calm buckets at different spots, that could be a good thing. Knowing the role, understanding the role. But again, that gets back to, I don't think they even think about it real heavily unless Gallinari is viewed as, look, it ain't going to happen for him this year.
Yeah. I don't think they were expecting much defense out of Gallinari either. So, certainly Carmelo is a guy who could give you something similar, I think, as to what you might have gotten from Gallinari. Another thing that came up this week that I thought was interesting was Malcolm Brogdon. Did an interview with the Globe, and he said of Jaylen Brown that he's not a guy who needs pep talks in terms of what to expect once training camp starts after the summer, in which Jaylen of course came up in so many Kevin Durant trade talks. Is that your perspective? You've dealt with Jaylen Brown since he came into the league. Would you agree with that Jaylen Brown is going to be not somebody who you really need to worry about in terms of how he's going to approach things in training camp?
Yeah, yes. But having said that, everybody likes to be, encouraged, given the pat on the back, shown empathy, all those things. So, yeah, I think he's going to come in and do his job. But I'm sure Jaylen Brown, like every player, would like to, have management teammates throw an arm around him and say, hey, that's done with. We're here now. Let's get this done. And, and the kind of togetherness thing. I think that can be really important, especially in this kind of situation where you've got a couple of guys that are, both young, both have had all-star appearances, and both have great value around the league. So you've got to, those guys finding a fit together is huge. And when one of them was at least chatted about media-wise all summer, had to hear his name that way, I'm not sure how much of that was reality negotiations. Will you take Jaylen Brown? I've heard two divergent thoughts on that from people who were involved. So I don't know. But the Celtics are going to kind of rise and fall heavily based on how well Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum can complement each other. So, he doesn't need to be, hugged and all that, but I think it'd be a smart thing.
Yeah, and I think the presence of Brogdon is something that will help with that. If you go back 2 years when when COVID was sort of really just raging, and there was the George Floyd protests, and of course Jaylen Brown went down to Atlanta and led one of those protests in Atlanta. One of the guys who went with him, and the only reason he went was because he was on the Players Association board with Jaylen Brown, and Jaylen Brown had mentioned during one of the board meetings that he was going to do it was Malcolm Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon, got in the car and went down to Atlanta with him and marched with him. And really, they didn't have a huge bond before that. But I think that really helped those two guys come together. So I think Malcolm Brogdon being there in Boston, I think that's going to be something that's good for Jaylen as well.
Yeah, look, Malcolm Brogdon, with this outlook, with the buy-in that we've seen from him so far to role, situation, etc., can be really important for the Celtics, not only on the floor but off. Having for Jaylen Brown, having a teammate who wants to talk about the same issues that he does. When I've talked to Jaylen Brown, it's not always basketball. There are issues that we share in terms of our concern. That's even more important to have that in a teammate, because you're on the buses, you're on the planes together. That could be a really important relationship for those two guys and for the team overall. Again, Malcolm Brogdon, if healthy, we know what he can do, and he can make a huge difference in how the Celtics' depth plays out, and its effect on the whole team. Being able to play other guys fewer minutes, important. All those things can factor in.
Final thing for you, Steve, and I almost hate to bring this up. It's about the 100th time that we've talked about a guy who was with the Celtics for all of about 6 months. But it's Dennis Schroeder. Why can't this guy get a job? He went out for the German national team. He had 17 and 10 the other day as they beat Luka Doncic, in an upset. Just a qualifying match, nothing too important. But this guy can clearly play, but doesn't seem like anybody wants him anymore.
Well, does the money match the contribution? I think he came to Boston for short money after allegedly passing up the $1 billion with the Lakers. Where's he at? Is he willing to accept whatever? And he may accept it, and sign his name on it, but is he really, quote unquote, accepting it? Is he accepting that that's the level of player he is, that he's a mid-level exception kind of player? They moved on from him in Boston when he clearly showed skills, but, did it work? And I think teams are looking at him now like, why are there so many stamps on his basketball passport? City stamps.
Yeah. Yeah, I was surprised Chicago went with Goran Dragic instead of Schroeder. He had, probably his best year was under Billy Donovan with the Oklahoma City Thunder, but they went with Goran Dragic in the end, and I think, Schroeder probably would have taken the same money that Dragic got. There's talk that the Lakers would maybe bring him back on a veteran minimum deal, which is kind of stunning considering where they were 2 years ago with him. The Mavericks seemed like a good fit. I've heard there's been no interest there whatsoever. So it's strange to see a guy who has had his reputation go so far downhill in just 2 years, who is still a pretty productive player.
Yeah, no, but that's, I think I had 2 calls. I was talking with people, and they brought up what you brought up in terms of Schroeder. That, wait a minute, if Billy Donovan didn't want him or couldn't get it done, maybe he did want him, but he couldn't convince the Bulls to get it done, then, that's like, those are flags that go up. What does this person know that we don't know? And it makes people hesitant.
Yeah. Well, no hesitation from Steve Bulpett. Always good to hear you, and always good to have everybody check us out. Appreciate it. Don't forget to check out Heavy Sports, especially Heavy on Celtics, and check out Steve's good work there and all our contributors. Again, I'm Sean Deveney from Heavy.com. Thanks, everyone.